At this point, we have all heard the wild stories of stuff that has happened in public schools. And I'm talking about those stories where teachers are hiding the fact that their child, someone's child is now going by a different name and opposite sex, encouraging that kind of stuff. And at the same time, they're the ones who are oversharing some adult information in the classroom and also have those adult themes books just in the school libraries. We've heard about all of that and how it's happening in Texas. So we've known that for a while. But what else do we know? We know that parents will stop at nothing to protect their kids, especially when they hear about this kind of stuff. And today we're going to be talking to one of those parents who was so motivated that she decided to run for office and is now a state legislator. It's time to spill some sweet tea. Welcome back, everyone, to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Guajardo. Thank you so much for being here today, joining us. Today, I'm joined by Representative Hillary Hickland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So you're a first-time legislator. How is that going? We're in the middle of session now. How's it feeling?
It's wild. Every week is its own animal. I feel like we're just constantly adjusting from, filing bills to then requesting hearings and trying to get support for those, working those bills. It's pretty wild.
Is there any way to mentally prepare yourself or get ready for it? Or is there any way to know what you're going to go through beforehand?
No, I think the best way is just to hold things loosely. And every day, we have these goals, but each day just do whatever you can to move the needle towards that goal. But yeah, every day looks different. Every week looks different. So you just do what you can.
Well, I'm glad that you're still in it, not too overwhelmed yet.
No, it's purposeful. And so that makes it worth all the effort and all the sacrifice.
Because you know what you're doing it
for.
So I had first seen your story because you're on Mandy's podcast called the Parent Empowerment Podcast. So go check that out if you haven't seen that yet. But you gave a little bit of a background of your story and why you chose to run for office. Would you mind going over a little bit of that? Why are you here today and why are you doing what you do?
I guess an overarching theme would just be that we want our government to reflect the people. And when I kept encountering issues that, our community values are just being violated, and issues that were affecting our home life, the day-to-day, the things that we love about Texas being infringed upon, made me want to get involved in a way that was beyond just volunteering in my community with the PTA or with my church, but actually get involved in policy and government.
And one of those things that happened to you that made you realize that was a story that happened with your daughter. Would you mind just giving a little bit of a brief overview of what happened?
Our public school culture has changed a lot, even in the last 10 years. And as a mom, I want the world in small doses. I want to navigate those challenges with my children. So I'm not trying to be a helicopter mom, but a lot of it was too much, and in a way that was pretty hypersexual and contradictory to things that we would want our children exposed to. A little friend of hers was being groomed to explore another gender without the parents knowing, and that was a hard thing for my daughter to witness, and then for me as a mom to know how to navigate that as well. And thankfully the parents became aware, and the situation has somewhat resolved. But it's an example of the things that are happening in our schools, and the desire for parents to maintain that position of influence in their kids' life, and hopefully to partner with educators, or and that was kind of one of the efforts in schools, wanting that transparency and that partnership between educators and parents. So that was just a little bit about my story, but then one thing leads to another and another. And it was, sexually explicit materials in our public school libraries, and rigor in our schools, and just seeing how a lot of families don't have options when it comes to education. And so that led to the huge topic of school choice and just freedom in education for all families and all students. And so one thing led to another, and here we are.
So something that really, and the reason I wanted you to bring this up was your backstory. I think influences a lot of the legislation that I was seeing just while reading through some of your bills. And it seems like a lot of them really do focus on the family and on protecting children in particular. So I'd like to go through some of those. So one of them was House Bill 1551, which is about public schools needing to notify parents if there was alleged criminal conduct happening with faculty. Will you explain some of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's personal. So when we started to really, as a group of concerned parents, started to gather and become aware of issues in our neighborhood schools and how we were finding out about pretty serious crimes that were not being communicated to parents, even parents of students who would have encountered an employee. So one specific case was an athletic trainer in our school, one of the high schools, was arrested for child pornography, watching it on his device at school. It was students who saw it and reported it. Wow. And then so he was arrested on campus. They took his devices, found so much child pornography, and the issue is that parents weren't made aware, even though he was arrested and charged, and only recently, by recently I mean within the last week or so, he was finally sentenced to time in prison. But that legal process is so long, and for parents or potential victims, they need to know what's going on in their children's school, what their kids could have been exposed to, also how to process that with their children. There really is a need for transparency and accountability, and we're just not seeing that to a full level. And I think if there's any resistance to this bill, it is around, well, you're innocent until proven guilty, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But you don't get arrested for no reason. And so those charges that are associated with an arrest is what charges are public information. And so it's just the school taking that extra step to communicate with parents when something like that happens. And it's just for certain crimes. It's not for bouncing checks. This is for things that parents would absolutely want to know about.
That is terrifying that even happened, that someone was discovered like that. And I can only imagine the fear as a parent, because what I would want to know is like, well, did this kind of behavior happen to, like, was behavior directed at my child? Do I need to, like, make sure that there wasn't, like, more illegal conduct that had taken place?
When parents asked school for information, we were directed to file a public information request. And so that's what we had to do. We had to go through the legal and the provided process of which takes weeks. A lot of parents don't know how to do that. And so...
Or even have the time to do that.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So you shouldn't have to file a public information request to know what's going on inside your kid's classroom.
Right. And again, I can only imagine like being a parent and having all of those responsibilities and then not being able to know whether or not my child is safe at school, which is extra terrifying. But then along with that kind of just wanting to protect kids from that kind of behavior, there is House Bill 1509. And I should give this kind of a disclaimer. I'm trying to appease the YouTube overlords by not using a certain language that they don't like. So I might say essay instead of a certain kind of assault. So that's 1509. That's having to deal with like the failure to stop or report child essay. So would you mind just giving an overview of what that does?
Every bill that I filed came from a real issue in my district or a meeting that I had. This particular one was from a law enforcement officer that was very heavily affected by a real case where a mom did not report the abuse of her child because it was the boyfriend that had done that. And that the lack of reporting was considered a lower level crime because it was parent and so the things that were the details that were surrounding that were causing a higher what needs to be a higher offense of a crime. And that's one of the things that the law enforcement officers asked. They were like, this little girl's life wasn't in vain, and she deserved to be protected. And so that's where that one came from.
And like changing that level of offense is also takes place in some of your other bills. There's House Bill 2444, which makes it a criminal offense to I think it's with trafficking minors across the border, and then, or is it just trafficking in general?
Yeah, well, it is specifically for minors. We were seeing a lot of children abandoned by coyotes or coyotes at the border, and
I was surprised that wasn't a criminal offense. Actually,
right.
Whenever I was reading your bill, I was like, oh, I didn't know that wasn't what it was already.
Right. Well, and these children are found with like a note with the contact information, and we really need to discourage that behavior. And you can't leave your child in a car by themselves. Right. It should not be okay to hand your child to a trafficker. And so that gets at that
right.
action.
And then there's actually, I think I said the wrong bill. So that was 1983. And then the other one was 2444, which is also increasing the offense, but that's for harmful communications to minors. And I'm guessing, was that having to do with the story with someone inappropriately messaging a child?
Yeah, it's the grooming. It's it's a little bit clearer to say, well, you can't expose a child to obscene material that's pictures, but what about narrations and the language and the context around that? So it's just another way to protect kids.
Yeah, I sometimes like just reading through some of these, and a lot of them, again, having to go back to dealing with protecting children who are put in, I guess, exploitative situations. I kind of just was reflecting on how we got here as a culture where this is something that's happening and we're having to make laws against because it wasn't something that was being protected against. Do you have any thoughts on how we ended up here and how we're going to navigate our way out through the culture?
It's such a good question, but more than ever before, there is a need to uphold a standard of decency where adults put protecting children and maintaining the innocence of children above convenience or entertainment or, potential inconvenience. And it's one of those things that our children are worth protecting, and I'm always going to fight for that. Just as a mom, wanting every child to have the benefit of a childhood that's free from some of the darkness that can surround them. And the state has a vested interest to protect children. And so you're right. I mean, that's just, I think as a mom, it's my natural bend, and wanting what I wouldn't want for my children, I don't want for other people's children either. And to be in a position where I can help make a difference for my community and for my state, and hopefully the next generation, is something that I'm definitely willing to work for.
One of the things that you mentioned was the fact that you being a parent is something that drives that within you, like that innate desire to protect your child and then therefore like other kids. Do you think that there was like a switch becoming a mom that happened where you kind of, I guess, became a mama bear, or that's something awoken within you?
100%. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, an individual can't get there without being a parent, but I will say that it is like a transformative, just life change where you go from just naturally being more focused on yourself and your needs and really kind of the present, to then being focused on someone else, willing to sacrifice yourself and being more focused on future. So it's a real shift that's kind of, it's a natural shift, but one that I don't know I would have personally gotten to without motherhood. And those factors that just really shift your focus in a way that I think it's better. I recommend everyone have children. It's the best thing about life, and it's life-changing for the good.
Well, the reason that I also bring it up is I think that because our culture now, less people are prioritizing marriage and kids, and it seems like the left especially has had this liberal narrative that doesn't value family, like family values. And it just seems like it's harder now to be a parent than maybe it was even 20 years ago. So I just think that there's like a shift in the way that people live their lives that's no longer family focused. And there's like, it just seems like you're living almost in a parallel culture as soon as you enter the family structure. But I'm not sure if that's, maybe I just live in Austin where I'm surrounded by only young adults most of the time. So I just see a lack of that family presence here. But I do wonder if that's part of what led us here, that we no longer prioritize family. And so people are a little bit less vigilant because they don't think about other people, because there's not usually kids around to have that mindset to help protect them. But.
Yeah, you're onto something for sure. I mean, it is not reasonable to expect anyone to feel the way about your children that you feel, to that depth of connection, and seriously, like, you would just do anything and you wouldn't think twice about it. And I don't know any other relationship that you just naturally sacrifice for in that way. And so there's something about, getting outside of yourself. I mean, that's why philanthropy is so rewarding. It's doing something that's bigger than yourself, beyond your own life. And I mean, not to go down different rabbit holes, but it's one of the ways to battle anxiety. A lot of times anxiety is very self-focused, where and not to take that in a wrong way, because I know that's something that a lot of people really struggle with, and I'm not trying to say that they're selfish, but it's that you can just become so hyper aware of yourself and your own circumstances and your own challenges that they just become so big. And it's almost an antidote to that, to lift up your eyes and to focus on something else, and to give that energy and effort towards something else. I really think it's what we're made for. That family is the most fundamental community. It's our first community. It's where we figure out roles and working together towards a common goal, and all compromise and sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so without that, I think we can be at a real disadvantage.
So I got married within the last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
But I've already seen like a transformation in the way that I think and like what I'm doing with my life, because there's another person, like even grocery shopping, being like, oh yeah, someone else I have to make sure like has like lunches or whatever planned out for the week with meal planning.
Right.
Or even him doing that kind of stuff for me, being able to receive those kinds of acts of service.
Yes.
But I can only imagine like whenever I become a mom, being able to, like right now, I cannot imagine waking up early on the weekends and just accepting that my like rest sleeping in time is over. But I am also looking forward, I guess, to that fact that there is going to be a part of me that's more selfless and like lives for something big, like other than myself. And I think some people can get bogged down in so much fear surrounding that. Anyway, but I bring all of this up because it just surprises me how we got to a culture where people aren't aware, or like that we're only now finding out about all of the dangerous books that are in libraries. And if we didn't have like the PTA moms or the home, what is it called? Like the homeroom moms who are there helping and looking into that kind of stuff, this is where things devolve. So it's just sad that we don't have enough vigilant eyes or people who are thinking outside of that. And I think that we are starting to see a change. But to bring it back to the other kinds of just hypersexualized culture that we're living in now, one of the bills that you authored is House Bill 1549, which is about obscene device sales, specifically the ones that are just in normal stores like Walmart. Like I didn't even think until reading this that just random challenges parents might face, like, oh, if I go to a store like Walmart to grab something, that my child might say something that's inappropriate. So will you like explain some of that bill and what the motivation behind it is?
Well, and that came to me again through my community. Various community members, city council members came to me and said that these devices are sharing shelf space literally next to kid toothbrushes, next to Band-Aids, next to everyday common items. Well, and in an age where we value consent, we have to consider parents do not consent to exposing their children to adult fetishes when they're grocery shopping. it's
and
not
the child
reasonable.
can't consent to seeing that kind of stuff.
No, and they're obvious. The titles of these items. It's obvious. Kids are learning to read, and even beyond kids. What about a preteen who's trying to learn, their role in like healthy relationships? What is this? It's so many things that really need to be driven by a parent and a family, and we shouldn't have to get like a personal shopper or a scout to go up and down every aisle of like, okay, it's clear, this one's clear,
Right.
this aisle is clear, and I don't really think that we need to dictate to various retailers how they need to display them. Either we say you can have them or you can't, and the bill that I filed doesn't create any new laws. It just clarifies. So already these devices already defined in our state code. The sexually oriented businesses where these devices can be sold already established, and they have to jump through a lot of hoops. They have to go through planning and zoning board. They have to get special licenses. They have to put notices on their doors. They have to make sure that 18-year-olds are not coming in. And so why are we requiring them to jump through all these hoops if then your average big box retailer can just put it on a shelf at eye level with children in any brick and mortar store? And so I want to be clear, like, I'm not banning any item. Gosh, it's such a buzzword.
Right.
Like, she's a book banner. No, if you can get it on Amazon, it's not banned. And that's just reality.
Yeah.
And if you can't wait for that 12-hour, one-day delivery, then find your local sexually oriented business. And it's again, sacrifice for the sake of another. Can we as a society decide there's a standard of decency that we want to uphold for the sake of children? And overall, I think our kids are encountering the world all over the place. And it's such a battle to protect them. How do we protect them online? With smartphones, with social media, we can look and see that this mental health crisis is very real for our children. And so I don't necessarily think that this is our biggest problem or that this is going to solve all the problems, but it's certainly a piece of it. And as a society, I think we can all come together and say, yeah, sex toys aren't appropriate for children. How
Right.
can we come together and protect kids from this until adulthood or when they're able to understand the appropriate context for some of these really heavy things that we're throwing at our youth. And that's overarching. I would say, we're burdening them with sexuality, climate change, politics, so many really heavy racism, so many heavy issues that adults have a hard time processing. And then we expect them to go out and dream.
Yeah.
And that's just really hard. I think there's, I know for me as a mom, I want to preserve that stage of awe and wonder and dreaming and creativity. And this is a piece of that.
I think on Mandy's show, one of the things that you mentioned is we're putting so much on kids, and then we wonder why is there a mental health crisis?
Yeah.
It figures. With that mental health crisis, and even some of this other stuff that we were talking about, like gender affirming, quote unquote gender affirming, right? Have you ever heard of there's a YouTuber by the name of Blair White. Have you ever heard of Blair by any chance?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
Blair is no, totally fine. So Blair is like a trans person, male to female, but in the right-wing space. I wouldn't use the word conservative, but one of the things that Blair's always talking about is kids can't consent to this stuff. I as an adult, I have a mental health issue. This is how I live that out, but that doesn't mean that someone under the age of 18 is able to consent to these kinds of things, these kinds of treatments. And I'm so glad that you brought up that word, because especially because I think the left is the only kind of sexual morality some progressive culture sometimes has, is just consent. And so I like that you use that language, because I think that that's something that most people can understand, is actually a kid can't consent to being able to see these kinds of explicit materials, whether it be text messages, whether it be a book that has explicit material in it, or even how obscene devices. I was trying to remember what the word is for it, like obscene devices in a store. So I'm glad that that's like the language and the way that we're trying to frame this issue so more people understand what the cultural context is behind some of this. Another thing, though, outside of us just ranting, I guess, about the the ways our culture has fallen, something that I think is good in the past few years is the Dobbs decision and changing the way that we see people and children and how we value them. And one of the things that I think supports that is when we're talking about how do we support children and mothers even during their pregnancies. So I want you to talk a little about one of your other bills, House Bill 1980, which deals with retroactive child support.
Yeah, it's a way to elevate motherhood. You know, there is absolutely it's a privilege, but it's also a heavy responsibility. And there's no way that I could have raised 4 children. I mean, still in the process of it, but we're not done yet. But without a lot of support, and thankfully, I'm been married for 21 years, and my husband's amazing, very supportive. But knowing that not all women have that, and really wanting to emphasize the need for support for a woman, and so or at least sharing the burden. And this would, because we have established personhood in the state of Texas, or at least rights of personhood at a heartbeat, that this bill will allow for child support to go back to that stage, and for a woman to actually get financial support, possibly health care, and those kind of benefits, so that she's not on her own.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I went to school at UT, and I was surrounded by a lot of opinions that differed from my own pretty often. But one of the things that I would hear is, oh, conservatives aren't pro-life, they're just pro-birth. And so I'm glad that there's been different parts of the movement, whether it be this or other stuff, that really does emphasize that conservatives are they're pro-women and motherhood and family, and not just
absolutely.
birth,
Well,
as they like
a lot
to
of
put it.
times when we talk about this, pro-choice movement, it's kind of ironic that we call it pro-choice. I was a mentor in a crisis pregnancy center for 10 years.
Oh,
and
wow,
what I
that's amazing.
found as I walked alongside these women was that they actually felt like they didn't have a choice, and that abortion was the least bad option, and that if they had support, or if they felt like they had support, a lot of times that was financial, like material support. If they felt like they had that, then they would make a difference. Then they would have felt like they had more choices. And so being committed to that and elevating motherhood, we just talked about in this conversation about how that is the best thing about life, is motherhood. You're never going to find a better source of unconditional love than in your child. You're never going to find a better bigger reward for all of your efforts and sacrifice than in your child. And really helping to emphasize motherhood and elevate that is so important and so crucial. And I truly believe that abortion hurts women. And so if we can help women in that state where they feel like that they actually don't have a choice, then that's going to benefit beyond just an individual circumstance, but I think it will have a cultural impact.
Yeah. One of the things that's just standing out to me about your experience, I guess both from schools and then now this legislation coming out of the fact that you've actually worked at the crisis pregnancy centers and gotten to see what women need, it seems to me like whenever we see people who are in positions like legislators and stuff, you don't just out of the blue become someone who's able to legislate and get into that position. There's like a ton of small steps that you take in getting involved and plugged into different things that get you to where you are now. So what are the smaller steps that, especially even younger women who are just realizing, I want to do something that makes a difference? How do I even get started?
I love this question because really there is a huge variety of ways to get involved, and it starts with wherever your heart is stirred. There's a reason that you care about that thing. And I think that whatever the issue is or the topic it is, that we don't just stop at it being a problem, but we look for opportunities to be part of the solution. And that can be as involved as just following a bill through the process, or gathering with other like-minded advocates for a certain thing, whether it's, locally in your community, but especially in Texas, the TLO website is so user-friendly that you can actually follow legislation. You don't even have to leave your couch. You can live stream committee hearings. You can submit testimonies. And there are ways to engage in legislation as it's being crafted. A lot of us, at least for me, I for a long time I thought my best step was just to call my legislator, at the end of the process and say, vote this way or that way. But actually, you can influence how the legislation is crafted. And I think it's really important to educate yourself on the process, and just join in with other efforts that are aligned in those focuses. It's ripe, and I think it's necessary if we want our government to reflect the people and what we care about. We have to get involved at whatever level, whatever capacity, to do that.
Yeah, even the another thing that I think helps is whenever you have a community that you're doing with it, because you don't need to do this just on your own as an individual. As easy as it is, it's helpful whenever you have other people. So like in college, I was part of Young Conservatives of Texas,
Yes.
and that was so helpful that they were educating us along the way of like, how do you go testify? Okay, we're actually going to get a group to go over there and do that kind of stuff together.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
finding building community, or you mentioned even church. You were like really involved with your church beforehand, right?
Right.
I think that those are the smaller, or because you of course should be involved in your political process, know what's happening. But if you need just a small step, go find a church community and just ask what you can do to help.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way, even if you don't have kids, to shift your mindset to thinking about others around you.
Right. Being proactive, and rather than being, in some kind of a silo or isolated where you're just grumbling and complaining. That's not a fun time.
So we talked about like the younger generation getting involved. What about parents who are seeing some of this material in their schools? They're hearing stories from their kids. What can they do if they want something to change?
I've been really encouraged that I see a lot more of a collective support versus like, well, I'm just going to wall up and take care of me and mine. I've seen more of a collective effort, or at least, that's the circles that I've encountered. And there are so many ways to speak out. You can go to the school board. I mean, you run for school board. Oh my gosh.
I know some people have done that. Love it for them. One day, maybe dreaming, but
yeah,
it's crazy.
Right. I mean, even if there's no losing. There's really not, because even along the way, there are so many victories.
And at least you raised attention for what's happening.
You did. You educated your community. You met people. You heard their stories, and just became more engaged. And that's really, it's got to be a struggle of our time, that when the entire world is available at our fingertips, and yet the dichotomy of being so isolated at the same time, that we really do have to fight for community. And as we're doing that, we have to fight for those community standards.
And something I always say is that the left, one of the things that they are great at is getting involved at their local levels and shaping things. And then they, of course, build up to state and national stuff. And I think it's time for conservatives to get involved. And I'm really motivated by the fact that more of us are doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't wait. There's absolutely various ways to get involved. And I would say just do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today to break down some of your
good.
bills, talk about culture. Let's finish this episode off with a cheers.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers. Hope you've enjoyed the sweet tea. I hope all of you guys have enjoyed the sweet tea. I'll see you next time.